I'm really glad that everyone's here today. This is a Microdosing 101 workshop, and the purpose of this workshop is to give you practical information to get started with a microdosing practice. Okay, my name is Kayci, and I'm a transformational life coach specializing in the integration of sacred plant medicines and holistic addiction recovery. I'm also on the board of Portland Psychedelic Society. I've been working with them for about 3 years now and just started on the board about 6 months ago. Portland Psychedelic Society is a 501c3 nonprofit donation-based organization. We provide education, community building, and support for research projects related to the safe, conscious, responsible use of psychedelic medicines. The opinions you hear here are that of the presenters or the participants and not necessarily reflect the standing of Portland Psychedelic Society. And when you're considering the use of these medicines, please be responsible for your own research that influences any personal use. We encourage developing connections with like-minded individuals here. However, this is not a place to source illegal substances or make contacts for sourcing. And we are a nonprofit donation-based organization, so please consider making a donation to the organization. I put the website in the chat, which is portlandpsychedelicsociety.org. I just wanted to acknowledge, what's going on in the world right now with the global pandemic, with the protesters against racism and the police brutality. And I'm just hoping that everyone is doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. And I think an important part of what Portland Psychedelic Society does is help people process through, underlying traumas that are actually, driving these issues. That's what happens with psychedelics is people get to become better human beings and, address things that are considered dysfunctional in their lives. So I just really wanted to commend everyone for being on this call today and, looking to see what you can do for your own personal growth. And I really believe that sends shock waves out into the universe, and us doing our work here, even though we're not on the street protesting, we are contributing to the betterment of our culture and the world. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the actual presentation. So if you have any questions that come up, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'm going to have Jason read those to me at the end or after I'm done presenting. And then we'll also open it up for questions for people just to raise their hands. So like I said, the medicines that I'm going to be focusing on today are the psilocybin and LSD to process for microdosing with those. These are Schedule 1 quote drugs, so they are illegal in the United States, which means Schedule 1 means they have no medical use and a high potential for abuse, which actually is not the case with these two medicines. In the 70s, there was what's called the war on drugs, and there's a number of medicines that were put into Schedule 1 status. And it's my opinion and what I've learned that the reason for that was not necessarily based on, the concern for the health of the public as much as it was for, criminalizing these medicines so the government could have control over certain populations of people. And Johann Hari wrote a book called Chasing the Scream, where he really outlines that information, and that's basically where I got some of my opinion on that. There are currently, what people are referring to this time as is the psychedelic renaissance. because it's, the use of psychedelics is really has come back on the scene. There's a number of privately funded organizations that are doing scientific research. Johns Hopkins University has been doing research with psilocybin therapeutic sessions for over 20 years. There's MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, and they've been doing studies on LSD, MDMA, ibogaine, and I think they're doing one on microdosing. There's another organization called the Beckley Foundation, and also the Hefner Institute. So all these people are doing their work to see what the medical benefits are for these medicines. And then there's all of this, what James Fadiman refers to as the social research, which is what we are all doing, where people are using it on an individual basis and then sharing that information with each other. And I'll tell you, it's really a huge movement, and it's really quite a beautiful thing to see. And there's also what I found today is that there's a website, clinicaltrials.gov, and that actually shows the current clinical trials that are taking place, and you can put in different information. What I put in, I think I put in psychedelics and depression, and there was a number of research studies that are being done. So those are some good resources for other information. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll give you some more resources. The protocol, so somebody was talking about, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but you were talking about using the Fadiman protocol for microdosing. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And that's what this information will be on, is the James Fadiman protocol. So the popular ones are the Stamets protocol and James Fadiman protocol. The Stamets protocol is you microdose, you take the medicine for 5 days on and then 2 days off. And the Fadiman protocol is 1 day on and 2 days off. That's the process that I started with for about 5 years ago. And that's what I recommend for people to do, to use this specific protocol with some, integration practices around it, so that you can learn how to develop a relationship with the medicines and see exactly how they work with you. It's not an exact science, and psychedelic medicines, work on, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level. So, you can't take it like a prescription drug medication and say, oh, okay, I'm going to take it and this is exactly what's going to happen. The shifts are really far-reaching and can be in every area. So there's that, and then there's also, each individual person. Some people are more sensitive than others. Some people can take a microdose of, say, 100 milligrams of psilocybin, and to one person, they won't feel it at all, and to another person, they may start having, perceptual experiences with it. So with the Fadiman protocol, what you get to do is, start taking the medicines, having a conscious experience of it. I'm going to recommend, meditation and journaling, so that you can track exactly what's happening and how you're doing with it and what the shifts are for you. That way you can see how the medicine works for you in your life, and then move out and start doing some experimenting with, different amounts, different protocols. So let's see. I got my notes here. Hold on a second. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits that people report from microdosing. And like I said, I've known people who have gotten completely off of medications for you know, bipolar, anxiety, depression. Now, I am not recommending that people get off of medicines on their own. It's, you know, that is a whole process in and of itself. It's important to work with your prescribing doctor. It's important to be aware of, you know, potentials of stopping medicines cold turkey. You know, there's a process of tapering down on medications. So, you know, I have seen people who've had great experience with it, but I just really want to stress that it requires a process. And some medications, it can be very dangerous to just stop them cold turkey. So it helps with mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, ADD, OCD. It increases people's focus and attention, or people have reported that, increased creativity, increased in interest in life, increased dreaming, intuition. The list is kind of endless, and it really depends on the individual. A couple of things to be aware of. People have reported people who are colorblind. There have been some reports of issues with that. People with that condition, where they will see more, they'll be prone to seeing tracers, and it will, you know, be for a prolonged period of time after microdosing. My own personal, I haven't come across that personally with anyone. I actually have someone that I know who's colorblind, who's been microdosing, and they haven't had that experience at all, but that has been something that's been reported. And also people who have anxiety just need to be aware of the use of the microdosing. There have been people who have reported increased anxiety with microdosing. So let's see, the medicines, when you're acquiring the medicines, you want to make sure that you're getting them from a reliable source, where they're, you know, where you know that they are what they say they are. With the LSD, it can be, I'm sorry, I just got distracted a second. With LSD, there is an organization called Dance Safe, and you can go on their website, and they have test kits that you can use for LSD. I mean, there's a number of other things that it tests. You know, the other drugs, cocaine and MDMA, but what I'm talking about specifically is the LSD. Some people will, you know, cut other medicines in with the LSD, so you want to make sure that what you have is absolutely pure. And with the mushrooms, again, you want to make sure that you have a reliable source. There is the option to, you know, grow your own, which again, that's illegal, so I have to say that. But there are, on our YouTube website, there's actually mushroom cultivation workshops that we have posted there, and we'll probably have more of those, so you can learn how to do that yourself. Let's see. So I'm just going to go on to move more into the specifics of microdosing. What microdosing is, it's ingesting amounts of these medicines. So again, I'm talking about psilocybin and LSD that produce a subperceptual experience. Now that's a little confusing because we're taking it because we want some kind of perception. So what subperceptual is talking about is that you're not going into any kind of a journey. You're not having any kind of tracers or, you know, your hand melting into the desk, nothing like that. So it's subperceptual. With the so again, with mushrooms and LSD, those are the two things that I'm talking about today. For mushrooms, a microdose, or for actually any substance, is going to be, the amount is 1/10 of what you would need as a perceptual dose. So, for instance, with psilocybin, they look at 1 gram being a perceptual dose. There's 1,000 milligrams in a gram. So what we look at is, 100 milligrams for a microdose. With LSD, a perceptual amount, like a full trip, would be 100 micrograms. So that's measured very differently than mushrooms. So 100 micrograms is what would usually be considered 1 hit. You can get LSD in the liquid form, tab form, gels. They put it in different forms, but 1 hit is usually 100 micrograms. So with the LSD, how people will create their microdose. The one way that I'm not a real fan of is that they'll take a tab. So a tab, for those of you who don't know, is just like a little drop of this medicine that's on a very small piece of paper. So, and then what people will do is they'll divide up the paper into 10 pieces. It's really difficult to know exactly how much you're getting on each one of those pieces. So in my experience of what works is taking a full hit and putting it in a bottle of water, so a 10-ounce bottle of water, and you let that sit overnight. And then what you're able to do is effectively measure out a microdose. So a microdose from that would be, you have 100 micrograms in a 10-ounce bottle, so 1 ounce is going to be 10 micrograms. So you can experiment around with the dosages on that, and you can have an accurate measurement of how much you're getting into your system. With mushrooms, people will just have them whole and measure them. So what you want to do is get a scale. So they're available on Amazon. They're like a gemstone. The gemstones, they call them gemstone scales. So you want a scale that's going to measure in milligrams. And again, some people will just take the mushroom and measure it and just have it raw. Excuse me. My recommendation for people is to get a coffee grinder and to grind up the medicine. Again, some people think that that's disrespectful of the medicine, but it works for people. So you grind it up in a coffee grinder, and then it's in a very fine powder form. And that way you can measure out exactly, 100 milligrams. You can get gel caps and then fill the gel caps with the powdered medicine and measure it specifically. So you know exactly how much it is you're taking. And then it's also, right there and available for you to use. So if you're, doing a 10-dose course, over the month, then you have your medicine there and ready for you. And you can try different amounts. You can do, just measure out 100 milligrams per gel cap. And if you take 100 milligrams and you're finding that that's a little too much for you, then you can just take half of that. If you want to experiment with, 150 milligrams, then you can, use a full capsule and then use a half capsule. So it's, in my experience, it's a good way to be able to experiment with those things. Let me see. What's next? So I'll go into a little bit more on the specifics of the protocol and how to use it effectively, I recommend creating a good solid journaling and meditation practice. When people talk about psychedelic medicines and the benefits of them, you often hear them talk about interrupting what's called the default mode network. You hear more about that in macro journeys. So what the default mode network is like the base structure that we operate through. So the ideas, the belief systems, the base life strategies. And people will refer to it as the ego also. The ego is the thing that keeps us safe. The ego is, it's constantly on the watch for things that will place us in positions of danger. And the ego has created all of these strategies and belief systems to support our safety. Now, what happens is that we outgrow a lot of these strategies. For instance, maybe as a child, if you're in a traumatic situation and you developed a disassociative strategy, where you like leave your body because you're in a traumatic situation. Well, then you're 30 years old, and this is still a strategy that is on a subconscious level showing up for you. And it's like, well, wait a minute, this is showing up at times it's really not that useful. So we outgrow these strategies and that default mode network. So part of our practice is being able to recognize what those are and, creating some kind of a replacement for those life strategies. And medicines can interrupt the default mode network. Addiction actually interrupts the default mode network. That's why people get addicted. There's other practices. Meditation interrupts it. Creative practices interrupt it. So, when you're looking for a shift, you're actually looking for a shift in that default mode network. Okay, journaling and meditation. The journaling part of microdosing practice is really important. What we want to do is be able to, see where we're at today. Then we set an intention for the shifts that we want to create, and then the shifts will happen. But oftentimes the shift that happens through microdosing is so subtle that people don't really recognize it. And then they walk away saying, oh, well, this didn't work. Or the specific intention that they had in the beginning of microdosing, they haven't acquired that yet or experienced it yet, maybe like a month and a half down the road. And so they think, oh, well, it's not working. So I'll talk about intentions right now, I guess. When we set an intention to have something shift, which is part of this journaling, which I'm going to get to, we may have this one specific intention, but there may be other areas in our life that need to be shifted before that one intention can be realized. So it's really important to be aware of like all of the benefits and all of the things that are shifting for us in a positive way. Just because the intention isn't coming to us the way we think it should doesn't mean that it's not on its way. And that's the difference between, people will talk about the difference between expectations and intentions. So, you can set your intention, but, be aware of your expectations of how that's going to show up and when it's going to show up for you. So the journaling, I'm just going to stop right here, because if I was doing a live workshop, I would stop and ask if anybody has specific questions about anything that I've talked about so far. Jason, is there anything that's specific?
that's came up. I've been talking to people about stuff here in the chat room. There has been a couple of places I wanted to stop you, but then they kind of just went on, and it slipped my mind. On clinical trials, for instance, I know that all trials, all the studies at all the colleges, or anyone who's allowed to do studies, that all happens through clinicaltrials.gov. We have some resources on our website that kind of teach you how to get approved in that too. We had Peter Addy come on and tell you, don't talk to the doctor. There's another number or email on there that you reach that person directly, and that's the person who's actually doing the work. The doctor, is doing doctor things, and they have a manager under them to deal with you, and you can get in contact with these people very easily. But there's not a ton of them happening. There are a few, but they're hard to get into. So I did want to add my 2 cents on that. As for microdosing, I'm curious what other people's questions are as well. I think, a lot of questions came up about alternative substances, and people are asking what substance we're talking about. I think when we're talking about these subperceptual doses with some of these, all of this data, we do not have government-backed studies that mostly say it's safe. We just know that it isn't killing anyone. And most people seem to report benefits as far as I'm concerned. And so when we talk about 4-ACO and these precursors to LSD, when we talk about LSD versus mushrooms, you're doing subperceptual doses. I'm pretty sure they're mostly harmless. They do good, but I don't think that they are deteriorating substances or something like this. This isn't to say cocaine and MDMA. I'm talking about these serotonin molecules.
Okay. Okay. Well, I didn't really hear any questions in there, so or for me to answer.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep going. So it's important to do. My opinion, it's important to create a journaling practice. What this does is it gives you space in your life, in your time, in your day, to be able to sit down and really reflect on your life, on your experience, on what's going on with you. With the microdosing, there's a sheet that I give clients. It's actually an Excel sheet where they can track, write down their quality of sleep, like 1 to 10. What their quality of sleep is, what their energy level is, what their mood is. And if you have a journaling practice, then that makes it makes you conscious of what the shifts are. I've seen people who have done microdosing practices and not done any journaling, or just have like participated in like a questionnaire kind of research study. And they really haven't been able to connect with what the shifts are for themselves. So, so the journaling practice, I think, is important. And it's also important for, for intention setting, for, all kinds of things that you can do as integration practices. So, I like to see people, carve out time in their day for journaling and for writing. And the other thing is a meditation practice. Again, these two things are what I call integration practices. A meditation practice, it does interrupt the default mode network, and it does so many different things. But specifically for these purposes, what it does is it opens us up to be able to create a space in our day, in our being, to be able to receive in different information from higher level source. And what happens is that we are we're so inundated with just stuff, but then all of our own thoughts, all of our own beliefs, all of our own, this is how it is, this is how I am, that we don't have space for anything new to come in. So, meditation, again, there's, I can list tons of benefits for it, but specifically for this, what it does is it creates opening and space for us to just get really quiet within ourselves and within our life, to be able to, connect with that intuition and receive in the information that that's being downloaded or given to us, to be able to make the shifts that we're asking for. So the meditation practice is really important. So the Fatima protocol is 1 day on and 2 days off. So I'm going to say, if you're, the other thing, when you're using the mushrooms, you need to be aware of the kind of mushrooms that you're using. There's a kind called azurescens, and those are actually twice as strong as cubensis. So what you're going to do is, so if you're using the azurescens, then you'll do like half as much as you would a dosing for cubensis. So if you're doing 100 milligrams of cubensis with the azuresens, you'll do 50 milligrams. So you want to be aware of the kind of mushrooms that you're using. So back to like when you start your protocol. So you'll have, what I have done in the past is I'll actually put it on my calendar and have my dose day, and then there's 2 days off, and then on the 4th day that's going to be another dose day. What I suggest when you're starting with microdosing is to be very conscious and aware on the day that you're on your dose day. So don't have a whole lot of things on your plate to do that day, just so that you can start seeing what your relationship is with it and how how it interacts with you and your day. You might be somebody who's really sensitive, and you'll take a 100 milligram capsule or raw material, whatever, and you'll find that you're really affected with it, and that you're having trouble with focusing, or you're just feeling kind of light and airy and not really wanting to get focused on doing anything. And so if you have planned like something that you need to get done that day, it's like, well, I can't do that. So that's why I think in the beginning it's important to experiment with the medicines and see how they work with you, and have that day where you can really pay attention to yourself and pay attention to the medicine. Once you've done that, numerous times, and once you've developed your relationship, and once you see how you work with it and how it works with you and what the benefits are, then you can start using it. You can customize your use of it, and maybe you go, well, I'm going to try 200 milligrams. 100 milligrams is subperceptual. I'm getting this really good. I'm feeling more intuitive. My mood is lifted. I want to see what 200 milligrams feels like. So you'll take a day and do 200 milligrams and see what happens on that day. And you journal about it so that you can kind of look back and see see what happened for you. So it's really about taking responsibility and using the medicines responsibly and consciously, and creating a practice that works for you. Regarding medicine, prescription drug medicine, most people, I'm talking about, like SSRIs, mental medications that are for mental health. Most people feel more comfortable getting off of those medicines before they start using any of the psychedelics. I do know of people who have used the microdosing in combination with tapering with some medications. I'm not recommending that, but it is something that I know that people have done safely. So again, it's important for each individual to do their own research, listen to other people's experience, and make your choices based on the information that you gather. Let's see. Medicines, I'm trying to think. Okay. Just a second. So with these, with this protocol, what usually happens is people will have the dose day. They will feel some kind of an effect with it, even though we're saying it's subperceptual. There will be some kind of a, lifted mood, more interested in their daily activities. They may sleep better, have more dreams. So, there's the effect that you have on your dose day, and then for most people, the day after is where they're feeling, a little bit more connected, a little bit more creative. And then on the third day, that's usually a day where people aren't feeling, or they're not having any kind of a noticeable, actual, real shift. So what is recommended is a 10-dose regimen of that, which is about 30 days. And after you do that, you'll have an idea about how the medicine works for you and what it's doing for you, or what it's not doing for you. If you're not feeling any effects, what you might want to do is try a different batch of mushrooms. You might want to try a different kind of mushroom. Like I said, there's the cubensis, there's the azarescens, there's a number of different ones. So you could try different ones. Some people will, there are all these other medicines that can be microdosed. So, once you get the process down, what happens is that you can apply this with different medicines. People use iboga and ibogaine. They'll use ayahuasca. So those are like the primary ones that people will use. So the other thing is the intention setting. So I did talk a little bit about that, but I want to talk about that a little bit more because what we're wanting to do is really pull ourselves out of the victim mindset and move ourselves more into the personally empowered mindset, where we're the ones who are in charge of our health, our mental health, our physical health, and become more empowered with the choices that we're making, and know that that's the basis of our experiences. The choices that we're making, and whether or not we're in resistance or allowance of these positive experiences that are ready to come in for us. So one of the things that I do, that I have people do for intentions is, so does everybody, hopefully everybody has something to write with, or a journal or something. Not, you could do this later or run and get one. One of the things that I have people do is, there's a lot of things to do for intention setting practices, so this will be kind of an abbreviated thing, just to get a basis down. Because what we're wanting to do is acknowledge what it is that we're no longer wanting, but then it's important to put that in the form of what we do want and what we're calling in. Again, the default mode network, the ego searches for things that are wrong. The ego searches for things that need to be fixed. And then it focuses on that and focuses on fixing it. What these medicines do for us is kind of take us out of that loop. And what we get to start doing is looking at what it is that we're wanting to experience and what we're wanting to bring in. And we get to learn this habit of switching from focusing on the negative to being able to call in the positive. Because what we focus on expands. Where our attention goes, energy flows. And we are really good at focusing on what's wrong and what we don't want. So what this exercise is just to get us started on moving into to what it is that we are wanting. So for those of you who have a piece of paper, just take your piece of paper and draw a line down the middle of it so that you have two columns. Now on the left side, so this is going to be for the intention setting. On the left side, what we want to do is write down what it is that you're not wanting, what it is that you're wanting to be free from. So for instance, depression. So you'd write down depression. And then there's other things that fall under that. So, how does that show up in your life? Low energy, negative thinking, self-loathing for some people, not being able to interact with community. So write down the thing that you're wanting to create a shift with by using these medicines. So do that on the left side. And then what you're going to do on the right side column is you're going to write how you would show up in your life, or how would it be to be free from this thing that you're not wanting. So, depression would be, expressive, uplifting mood. Low energy, the positive would be high energy. So just go ahead and take a couple of minutes to write that. Or if you're not writing, just consider it in your mind. So this is a practice that can be used ongoing with just about anything. And then there's, there are other practices to support it. You can do affirmations. There's something called tapping, emotional freedom technique. There's certain, manifesting meditations that you can do. And I actually refer to all those things as integration practices. Because what we're wanting to do is have our intention, use these medicines to assist in raising our level of consciousness and having our brain work together a little differently. And then, ground these shifts that happen in our lives in some way. So that's where the integration practices come in, is that, grounding these changes in our lives. And, just like helping to support us in creating these shifts that we set these intentions for. So the medicines, the psychedelic medicines and experiences, sometimes it can be extremely profound and really lift us up. But what's important is for us to be able to have have a picture of what it is that we're wanting things to look like, so that we know what it is that we're wanting to move into. And the integration practices, there's all kinds of things. There's the physical fitness, yoga, Pilates, hiking, walking. There's creative practices, writing, singing music, writing music. There's float tanks, which is awesome. That's actually, some people will use that prior to going on macro journeys, just to get themselves used to being in that psychedelic space. So there's these integration practices that we can start incorporating in our lives that help in grounding this higher level being that we're seeking to experience. So it all works together. So after you get this base foundation of so about the intention setting. So once you have those intentions, you kind of want to revisit it and start looking for where there's shifts that are happening, because again, it can be so subtle that you miss it. So it's important to maybe one of them is to have a better relationship with your son, and maybe there's like a minor shift in like you feeling like you're more welcome in his life, or maybe you have like one or two conversations that are a little bit more open and inviting than you did before. Maybe you have a shift in perspective on an opinion that you have about him. So all of those things, like, it may be subtle and it may be small, but it's still pertinent. And what happens is, like, there will be these little shifts that take place, and then 3 months down the road of all of these little shifts taking place, the picture looks completely different. So that's one of the benefits of journaling, and also revisiting your intentions, so that you can start training yourself more to look at the positive and look at what you're wanting to bring in, rather than looking at what the negative and looking at what you don't want. So yeah, other integration practices is getting connected with community, which I love. Connecting with individuals, being able to have conversations. Again, that's something that we do in Portland Psychedelic Society. That's a main part of our mission, is creating community. And some people, a lot of people need therapy at different times in their life to get through, certain major issues. And that might be something that will come up with microdosing, where where you go about your business, you're doing your thing, and then all of a sudden, like, this big major trauma is revealed, that or you're having some kind of emotional upheaval, and you can look at some underlying trauma that hasn't been addressed. So an integration practice that you might incorporate is seeing a professional therapist. So yeah, that's for integration. And I'm gonna again stop there and see, just make sure that I'm on track and I'm being clear with all of this. Does anybody have any questions right now? Or is there any part of this that's confusing or not clear? Because what I want you guys to be able to have is like have it be very clear that this is the process that you can go through from beginning to end with a microdosing practice.
So a couple questions that came up in the chat was, how long do you microdose? Once we start microdosing, is it for a few weeks? Is it forever?
Okay. That's up to each individual. I've been doing it on and off for 5 years. My experience is that once people start using it as a practice, if they find it beneficial, then it's just something that they do. That's why I was talking about developing that relationship with the medicine and seeing how it works with you. And other people, they'll use it for a period of time and they get moved up to a higher level of consciousness, and it's just not something that they do anymore. There's those of us who are, prone to some mental health situations. I'm ADD and have actually recovered from chronic clinical depression. And so it's a practice that I use on a regular basis. And it works for me. So yeah, I think it's important to see what your experience is with it and develop the relationship, see if it works for you, and then it's up to each individual person how they continue with that. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think it did. We also got some really good comments here about how to do the LSD dilution. And, just put some highlights here are that chlorine, heat, oxygen, light, and time are all going to dilute your LSD once you put it into water. So you need to be real careful about what water you use, what you're going to store it in, keep it in the fridge, keep it in something dark. If you want to refer to more details on that, that's in the chat. I wanted to throw out that Third Wave is a great resource for people who need something to reflect back on. They have great guides broken down by stuff. So another one we have here is, one I wanted to throw out, Kayci.
Here, wait. Okay, wait. Just let me talk about Third Wave for a second. Because that's, that's, the Third Wave, it's the thirdwave.co. And it's an excellent website for resource. They also have, I think there's like a $50, the microdosing program, basic program, I think is like $50. But they have a lot of really good information on there about psychedelic use, but specifically microdosing. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the other one I wanted to throw out about people who shouldn't be microdosing, James Fadiman says people who are colorblind should not microdose.
Yeah, I actually covered that a little bit. Yeah, I did, and again, I guess it's a precaution to take, but I know somebody who's colorblind that microdoses and doesn't have any issue with it. So, again, that's where really taking responsibility for yourself, creating your own experience, or, taking responsibility for having your own experience really comes in. But, listening to these, precautions and experiences of other people.
I was commenting to some people here in the chat. We have people asking, LSD better for focus, mushrooms better for mood. True or false? That was the question in the chat.
Yeah, my own personal experience is, is that, I have used LSD in the past for attention and focus, and it's been very useful. Again, developing your own relationship with it is really important, and experimenting and see how it works for you, and then, making your choices based on that is really important. Yeah. Did that answer that question? Stephanie, go ahead.
I just had a question about how do you know that this is good for you or not? I mean, have you experienced people who have had a negative reaction to this, or it hasn't worked for them, and any thoughts on how that would feel to someone? Like, how would you know that it isn't working? Because this is also subjective. I have trouble knowing how you judge its effects.
Well, that's part of what I was talking about in developing your relationship with it and seeing how the medicine works with you. I have had people who have tried microdosing and said, oh, it really didn't do anything at all for me. They've revisited with, a different batch of medicine. They've revisited with that's why I recommend the focused practice of journaling and meditation, is so that you can get a real clear view on what the effects are for you. Because they vary widely, and they can also be so subtle that you can miss it. And because people will have like these big expectations of these shifts, and it's like the universe is saying, well, we need to, there's these other things that need to be shifted, just a little bit at a time, and which eventually will lead to this large shift. So if people aren't recognizing these smaller shifts, then they just like throw everything out. So that's why I really encourage people, sticking with the practice for a period of time and having, see what their relationship with it is. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, for a few minutes, my Zoom just completely deleted it, shut itself down, and restarted, and I didn't hear anything for a while, so maybe I missed what you said, so I apologize for that. It is really nice to hear other people who have ADHD and that they are having some possible improvement. Is a huge thing. And I am also taking Adderall, and I find that it's actually very helpful for me. So, I don't like to be negative about that. It is actually a lot of times positive for people. And it keeps me from potentially using other drugs inappropriately. So, it is a good thing. And, it is always a question of whether you should do them at the same time. The only thing that's good about Adderall is that it goes away out of your system in about 12 hours. So if you decide you don't want to be on it, you can just stop taking it. There's no side effects to doing that. So that's a positive of that. Also a negative in a way, because you find yourself running out. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to give a positive note on that, because I think it's important we realize that. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Okay. Any other, Danny? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks very much, Kayci. It's been very informative. I really appreciate it. And can I ask the question that I had at the start here now?
Please do. I forgot.
Yeah. So yeah, no problem. So yeah, I had some macrodoses last year, like I said, and like the goal was to get rid of my depression, because I've been suffering from depression for like a long time. For years, and I'm also recovering from alcohol and drug addiction for like over 20 years. So it was a big step for me to do this, and I did the macrodoses, and then, like as I said, it unfolded over the space of a year, maybe 10 months, like since I started the macrodoses, where this like trauma got released that I had completely blocked out of my conscious mind, and it happened while I was microdosing after the macrodose sessions. And so I contacted the therapist, the therapist who sat with me for the sessions, and he said that I should stop the microdosing. So I did stop it for like a bit of time. I've been in therapy. I've been connecting with like recovery groups and stuff like that. But last week I had started it again, and last week some fear got triggered, and I think it was like related in some way to the trauma that I'd experienced all those years ago, like in a roundabout way, because I guess I keep setting up these patterns in my life, which I'm more aware of now, but I haven't been able to get out of so far. And you know, a lot of fear got triggered, and I was like, oh no, I'm after like re-traumatizing myself now. And you know, I was just wondering if you had any experience with that. And in saying all of this, I just want to say as well that like I've been microdosing with LSD, and I've been having some really like amazing insights in my meditation practice because of it, like, you know, like really deep insights. And it's really like there has been a huge shift since the trauma got you know, released back a few months ago. And I'm making changes, you know, so, but I don't want to go back too far, like, you know. I know that it's not always a forward journey, that there's going to be some steps back. So I'm after like spitting a lot out there. I hope it wasn't too much, and I'd love your insight on that if you could, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that experience. Can I ask, what's the amount that you're microdosing with?
I'm microdosing like 1/30th of a tab, so between 5 and 10 UG of a, because I checked the tabs on DanceSafe, and they're 240 UG, so 1/30th is like I guess between 5 and 10 micrograms, or 5 and 10 UG. It's a really low dose.
Okay.
Because I messed around with or I didn't mess around with it, but I tried like a higher dose, and I felt that it was too high, so I dropped it way down, like.
Okay. Yeah, you know, this is one of the reasons why I really encourage people, like when they're macrodosing, to have sufficient preparation, and have an integration plan. You know, one of the things that I do with people is that I'll have them you know, do a timeline, and I have them, you know, write out you know, the positives and the negatives, but, you know, write out their timeline, so that they can see the different traumas that they've had in their life, and the things that that need to be addressed. And also, you know, what people can do with that exercise is look and see, you know, what the you know, what the belief systems are, or the, you know, life strategies are that have been developed around those traumas. When we have an unresolved underlying trauma, it comes out in different ways, and what it's doing is it's calling to be healed. It wants, you know, as human beings, as spiritual beings, you know, we are, I believe, constantly being called back to our wholeness. We're being called to connect with our authentic self, or our true self. So when there's some kind of unresolved trauma that's present, it will show up, and it will, you know, it'll, you know, give us the high sign and say, hey, there's something here that you need to look at. And absolutely positively, psychedelics will bring those things up. I believe that that's what it's for, is to, you know, to reveal those things, you know, shake it up. But, you know, usually oftentimes there's some kind of a perception shift that assists in resolving that. If that's not the case, my opinion is that there's just more unpacking and more integration that needs to be done with that. You know, a little bit more examination about, well, why did this come up? What's the message in this for me? You know, people will look at difficult psychedelic experiences as a quote, a bad trip. I know that there's, you know, trips that are very, very difficult, but I don't refer to them as bad, because there's, you know, there's always I believe, a purpose and meaning for something. It's just a matter of us being able to learn how to translate it into, what's the message here? What is it that's trying to come through? With your situation, it might be, that you're being asked to incorporate some different integration practices. I don't know exactly what that might be for you. Maybe it's, some creative practices where you can express that part of yourself that will allow you to process more through that trauma. I don't know, maybe some more medicine work with, deeper preparation and integration. But yeah, there's stuff, I believe it'll keep coming up until we're able to translate it and give it the love and attention that it needs. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really appreciate that because, like, as you were talking there, I've seen where I have had a lot of perception shifts, and I haven't been journaling. So, like, I just actually started journaling last week. So I just, it was good to hear that because I haven't. They've been subtle, like, but it's in process. Yeah, and I am thinking of doing another macrodose maybe later this year or early next year, to help because I wasn't conscious of the trauma when I initially took the macrodoses, but now that I am, I think that maybe I can work with it a little bit better in a better way, So thanks. It's been very informative. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I just really want to say, with that piece of information about a trauma that you were not aware of, and then you became aware of it, that's a big deal. That's a huge assault on the consciousness too.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, not having any information about this, and then all of a sudden, have this information revealed. So, yeah.
There was little hints along the way, like over the years, but like I kind of ignored them because I wasn't ready to deal with it, I think. But my life has completely changed. Like people have telling me that my voice sounds different. I'm like happier. My mood is elevated. So it's been like a huge breakthrough for me, really. So
Nice.
So yeah, it's just been complete miracle, really. So thanks.
So I just wanted to. There's a group called Psychedelics in Recovery, and there's a website. It's psychedelicsinrecovery.org.
I've been on there a couple of times, yeah, but I'm in Ireland, so it's difficult. It's like later. It's like 2 or 3 a.m. here. But, yeah,
all right.
so thank you.
Never mind then. Okay. David?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Kayci, first, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your wonderful presentation. Much appreciated. At least we're getting something out of all this COVID nonsense. We're in Dallas here, so I have the wonderful opportunity to work with with your society, which is amazing. So thanks again. I work in Dallas as a health professional with Teresa here. We discuss with clients the use of, as you have mentioned, meditation, cognitive, and microdosing with the various materials to speak of, in addition to others in compounded mixtures, to both consolidate the insight from the macrodose sessions as well as work on some of these other modalities you mentioned. One thing I wanted to mention, just to throw it out there to make sure people have an understanding, that I've looked at both Fadiman's references and as many as I can, and also with regard to Stamets, as where do they get these intervals and such, and just have everybody realize that frequently clients themselves will discover intervals and means of microdosing that are not maybe the conventional interval or dose, and even may change both drugs and doses and timing. So feel free to, don't feel that you have to be on a particular regimen, although if you're just starting off, it's totally reasonable and not a bad idea to work with someone and follow a regimen. So if you think about it, the body responds best when it comes to medicines to changes. It doesn't like constant levels of just about anything, and so that's why SSRIs and various other meds are frequently not really not a good thing at all. One extreme will be an infusion of a medicine that's constant, like let's say when you're in the hospital, an IV infusion. The other extreme is intermittent, really big doses, such as a macrodose. Now you can also take it down to different intervals, and so we've talked about every third day is every 72 hours, and then there's also, as we've discussed, the 5 days on, 2 days off. So just keep in mind that the key is breaking things up, and feel free to understand that your body, you may come up with something entirely new that works for you, and you might end up sharing with others, and it may be a wonderful concept, because yeah, it's just there are no real rules as long as you're keeping it safe with the dose and things that work with you, and as long as others, and for instance, this wonderful forum and others that can provide meaningful advice. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there, is that feel free to consider other dosing regimens of microdoses as well as other larger doses as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That's exactly which is part of what I was including in my closing, is that once you develop a relationship and get, start using the medicine, that's why I recommend the Fatima protocol for 30 days, is so you can get a real conscious experience of how the medicine works for you. Then you can move into using it, in any way that you want. There's a Stamets protocol, 5 days on, 2 days off. Other people talk about, 3 days on, 4 days off. So there are, all kinds of. Thank you so much, David, for pointing that out. There's a lot of different ways that people use these medicines, which is the beautiful thing about it, is that, once you figure out how it works for you and what the benefits are, then you can use it however you want. There's really nothing that restricts you. And then there's, also there's supplements. There's, Paul Stamets' protocol talks about stacking. People will talk about using lion's mane mushrooms and niacin along with it. So there's, a number of different things, and, the integration practices, the, different supplements to help address the, different mental health issues that you're working with. There's all kinds of different things to integrate with it. So yeah, thank you so much, David.
Yeah, and good point with regard to the supplements. You're right. The lion's mane and others, there's a lot of things they don't all have to be in the psychedelic realm. So thank you.
Actually, I'm going to have on July 5th, I'm going to schedule, I don't know if it's up yet, but I'm going to schedule Microdosing 101 Integration Practices workshop, which will be like the follow-up to this, where people can talk, where we can talk more about, the integration of this base practice, and, things that people can do after they've learned about their relationship and the specific practice of microdosing. I think like what David's talking about. So that's going to be on July 5th. I thought it would be nice to have it around Independence Day. So any other questions? Go ahead, Anthony.
So as far as the journaling, do you do this like on the day of the microdose, the day after? I mean, I've been here the whole time, but maybe I need to microdose more, pay attention better or something. I don't know.
I refer to it as a microdose, or a journaling practice. So it's about just having a practice of journaling, writing stuff, creating that time and space in your day and in your life to be able to sit down and go, okay, I'm going to self-reflect today. I'm going to, write out about how, my sleep is and how my my depression's getting better, or you sit down and write about some issue that's like running over and over in your head, or like Danny was talking about, that he had this this stuff come up, this trauma stuff come up, and this anxiety, and it's like it's all inside of him. And journaling and writing is one way to be able to get that stuff out and process it. So for me, I just suggest it as an ongoing practice to be able to process things, get stuff out. And there's different ways of journaling. There's you can sit down with a prompt. You can, people will do non-dominant hand journaling. So there's, different things that come out when you use your non-dominant hand. You can use, automatic writing, where it's like you're not really even thinking about what you're writing. You're just writing whatever comes off of the pen out your hand. So there's different practices.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Kayci, I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ginger.
Can you just address why we take a day or two off in between doses?
I'm sorry, hold on. I got a dog thing happening here. Okay. With the Fatima protocol, I don't know specifically necessarily why he recommends that, 1 day on, 2 days off. I recommend people trying that so that they have, so that they can consciously see what the differences are. The dose day, the day after, the third day without it. They also talk about, I don't know, David might have more information on this, but it's important to have a break, to give your body a little bit of a break. I don't know that there's, people talk about a tolerance getting built up, and I'm not quite sure about that. But it is just, it's recommended to, to give your body a little bit of a break. The Stamets 5 days on and 2 days off, to give your body a break so that it can come back down to a little bit more of its regular cycling. So that's the best answer that I have for that.
I've been meaning to ask, and this seems like a good place to ask. Does the day off have something to do with receptors and uptake inhibitors, and keeping channels clear and receptive?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
But I don't have, so we just had, we just had a presentation by our scientific research and education chair.
Aaron, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
we're so on the YouTube channel is the video on that. And he does talk about, he talks about the specifics of it, and he does talk about a tolerance. That could be part of it. I'm not really well versed on the specifics, on the science part of it.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to go onto that YouTube video with Aaron Eisen to get more information and put that together in your brain, that's where I would suggest you look for information on it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Stephanie, go ahead. Unmute yourself, Stephanie. Stephanie, you're muted.
Hi there. I'm sorry about that. One thing I've been looking into is something called the San Pedro cactus. I know it's sort of something that you could possibly cultivate if you were, interested in that kind of thing. That is a bit like the peyote, but it doesn't require such a long time to grow. It grows faster, and therefore you can probably grow it as a house plant or something like that, possibly. Have you ever used that or worked with that or anything that's related with that for microdosing?
I have not, period. I have not used it with microdosing. I have not used it, actually I haven't used it with macrodosing either. But I would, that would be a medicine that you could microdose with also.
Yes, I've also never tried that or used it or anything. I just, apart from reading Carlos Castaneda, I know nothing about it.
I shared a link in the chat. We had a local last year give a presentation. She grows the cactus and she teaches how to do that. She talks all about it and gave a good presentation. So I just shared that YouTube video as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to copy that out now.
Yeah, she's around sometimes. I haven't seen her on any of these internet chats, but she's always at our regular events for regular questions.
I've been trying to germinate some seeds and have had no luck, so maybe I'll learn something from the video.
Who is that, Jason?
Teresa Ulrich. She played flute at our conference, and she.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, thank you. David?
Yes, Teresa has a comment regarding, go ahead.
Hi, so when you talk about microdosing the cactus, so you can microdose San Pedro also, which is also known as Wachuma, and you don't necessarily have to grow it. You can if you want to. That does take a while. Working it down into a brew is a pretty long process. So it doesn't mean that you can't do that, but you can also buy San Pedro powder online, and microdosing that at about, well, when you talk about grams, basically about 2 teaspoons is really, really effective.
I have used.
Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right, John. We'll get to you in just a second.
And I would also say that, especially if you are used to using Adderall, it happens to have a stimulant quality to it. It's a little bit, the molecular structure is a little bit different than amphetamine when you look at those things. And so, for instance, I've had situations with clients that have utilized it in that capacity. So it's really very effective. It is just slightly nauseating. So, but again, some people also have a little bit of nausea with microdosing mushrooms too. But I would tell you it has a very, very good quality.
Weight loss feature there built in.
I always like to try to connect with the plant, because I've always been one of those people who feels a strong energy vibration from the plant, and the mushroom or whatever. Find it growing and living is sort of part of it for me. So growing it would be really helpful to tune into its vibration. I don't know what the non like new age way of saying that is, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
No, I'm totally with you. And here's a thought: is do grow the cactus, but also you can order online. It's I think it's probably even more or less kind of legal. So it's one of the ones you can actually get without a lot of trouble. It's a wonderful way to get into it quickly, and then but then be growing the cactus. So you're right about that. It's great to connect with whether it's mushroom or practice. So go, yeah.
I think you dropped out right at the key word there. What is it that she should look into online that we can get legally?
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, it's called Wachuma, and it's sold as it's a powder, and it's kind of sold as a aloe vera. I mean, it comes to you as quote unquote aloe vera, but probably it's not technically like, maybe it's not, but you can get it without a lot of trouble. And my suggestion was do indeed grow the cactus, and it's frequently grown as a clone where you take a little piece and you grow it you can grow from seeds. Advise go ahead and do that. But I think you could do both concurrently. Otherwise, you might be waiting a year between growing it and having it rot or having it not get. It's not hard, but it can be a little tricky. So do both. I advise do both, and you can kind of have two irons in the fire and hedge your bets a little bit.
Right.
And could you spell Wachuma for us in the chat, please?
Okay. Yeah, we'll do. It's spelled both two different ways.
WACHUMA.
You're breaking up. I can't hear you. Just type. It'd be so great if you could type it in. I'd be really appreciative.
Yeah. And that's just another word for San Pedro. It's another word used to describe San Pedro. And, it is a legal cactus to my understanding. Sometimes you can get lucky and even purchase a mature cactus at the Home Depot for about $30.
Right.
Yeah, but in Oregon, we don't have cactuses at the Home Depot.
In the
but
video,
I totally see your point. Yeah, I've seen it as supposedly it's also a house plant. So there's that.
Yeah, in the video that I cited, the YouTube video up there, there are some places you can acquire this locally, just like a Home Depot.
Oh, really? Great. I will definitely watch the video. Thank you so much for that. That's huge for me.
Yeah, thank you so much for that feedback. Appreciate it so much. Now, John, did you have something, a comment?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I was attempting to use the voice typing earlier as my arthritis. Anyway, I'm glad you could hear me. I've seen San Pedro at the Home Depot occasionally. It's unmarked, or occasionally it'll say Trichoceros on it. But I've microdosed with that, and also I'm particularly fond of the Peruvian torch, which is a very similar, except a bit stronger. When I came in on the meeting, you were talking about taking a day off. I should have done that one time with the psilocybin, because I run into old friends. We got together, for some music, and man, I couldn't remember anybody's name. It just was just kind of a side effect that was very frustrating. I guess the
welcome to the world of ADHD.
But anyway, I'm glad that I finally got on to the meeting here. It's just too bad that things like LSD and peyote are available in Canada, and you can get them online as long as you're in Canada, but not in the United States.
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment. And yeah, it's there's people that are working on that, which I'm happy about that, to get these medicines decriminalized. So thank you for that input. And again, I just really want to stress that we have, we have several discussion groups where people could come and, just talk about whatever it is that they're wanting to discuss.
I want to just acknowledge now that our, time is up with the meeting. For those who need to, be somewhere else, I want to, release you. But it seems the conversation is still pretty good here. So we want to, I'm willing to stay on for another half hour myself. So I just wanted to let you know that we are at 5 o'clock. The meeting's been going a couple hours, and
thank you so much for being mindful of that. And Yeah, so just a couple things I wanted to give people some information. There's a couple of groups on Facebook. There's one, it's called the Iboga Microdosing, and another one called Microdosing for Health and Well-Being. So you can look those Facebook groups up and join those for, it's just, people sharing their experience. Also, on Reddit, there's a microdosing thread, so you can get information there too. But again, this is, you need to do your own research and, take people's experience, but then come back to yourself and, be logical about it and be mindful and, take care of yourself when you're using these medicines. So yeah, that's all I have. It was a pleasure to connect with all of you.